It's a special episode of the podcast where I explain to my new friend, Jim Fields from Nebraska, how to start a trivia night in his hometown. This is Trivia with Buds. What it be, and welcome to another episode of the Trivia with Buds podcast. I have a special episode in store for you today. Now, usually this show is a variety of things. Sometimes it's me asking trivia questions. Sometimes it's me interviewing somebody from the industry, like Craig Bartlett, creator of Hey Arnold, if you want to go back a few episodes and check that out. Sometimes it's two friends of mine going head-to-head in topics that they're good at, like Game of Thrones and Parks and Rec, or Seinfeld and WWE. This specific episode is about how to start a trivia night wherever you might live. Maybe you've been thinking about that. Maybe you've been listening to this show and going, I could do that. Or maybe I want to do that for a couple hours a week and try and turn it into something. And that's what this episode is all about. I'm not going to take up too much of your time with an intro in this episode, but I do want you to hit me up if you have any questions. ryanbudds@gmail.com. Let me know how I can help you, whether it's resources for coming up with trivia questions for yourself or your event, or how to approach different venues about getting something like this going. I am happy to lend some eyes and ears to your cause. ryanbudds@gmail.com, or use the contact form on triviawithbuds.com. We're going to dive right now into this 1 hour phone call with my good friend Jim Fields. Here we go.
This is how you start a trivia night.
All right, here I am standing at the bar in my house. It's so good to record stuff at home. This is my studio. It's not a very sound conducive room. It's kind of spread open, and it has laundry being laid around it right now, so it smells great. And I am here on a Skype call with my new friend Jim Fields. How's it going, Jim?
Good. How about yourself, Ryan?
Pretty good, man. You are a listener of the Trivia with Buds podcast, and you sent me a nice email talking about how much you like the show and possibly wanting to start a trivia night in your town. Now, you're in Nebraska, right?
I am. Live in South Central Nebraska.
South Central. Is that like South Central LA at all?
Yeah, probably a little bit different, I'm thinking.
Are the Wayans brothers involved in a parody of your town?
They have not been at this point.
Not yet.
You never know.
Very good. And are you born and raised in the middle of the country there, Jim?
Born and raised actually in Illinois.
Oh, very good. What part?
Northern Illinois. So actually not far. I was in Rockford, Illinois. So
yeah.
not far from where you were in Chicago.
I was, back in the day, one of my big credits was I was on Rockford Morning News to promote a comedy show at a place called the Roadhouse in Rockford. I believe it was called the Roadhouse. And it was like the movie Roadhouse, but not as fun. But I went on there and wore an ugly Christmas sweater. Which I think there were a lot of Bill Cosby jokes about my sweater on that show at the time, because this was about 8 years ago.
I was going to say a little unfortunate now to have those.
Yeah,
jokes.
I had to burn that sweater in a pile of pudding, which was really sad for me. But yeah, so Rockford, I have a lot of attachments to that. Rockford was always like, hey, come do this random comedy gig at some bar in Rockford, Illinois for $150. And I'm like, well, it's only 2 hours there and back, So I would, and you usually wouldn't have a hotel if you were from Chicago. So very familiar with the Great Plains of Rockford, Illinois. So what brought you out to Nebraska, which is even more plainy?
It is even more plainy. I moved out here a little over 3 years ago now for a job.
Oh, so, what do you do for work right now there, Jim?
I'm a community relations officer for a nonprofit who supports people with intellectual disabilities. So
very good. And is that something you went to school for, or just something you kind of fell into?
No, I did youth ministry for 12 years and had led mission trips out here to the place where I now work. And when it was time for a change, it was a good place to come. And so we moved 600 miles across the country without really knowing anybody. Very
good. And are you solo on this trip, or do you have a family?
I have a wife and a cat that we moved with, and then a dog who we acquired once we got here. So,
what are the cat and dog's names? I'm curious.
Yeah, the cat is Sawyer, and the dog is Maya.
Ah, are those after any literary characters?
No, they seem to fit, I guess. So
I have a dog named Carver, named after the author Raymond Carver. Are you familiar with him at all?
I'm not.
There's probably the most famous thing. They made a movie, kind of an anthology drama movie based on his short stories called Shortcuts. It came out in the early 90s. Also, the movie Birdman, if you've seen that, Michael Keaton is doing a stage play of a Raymond Carver story, I think.
Oh, okay.
So that's a very inside reference to why my dog is named Carver. Also, we got him around the time season 3 of Nip Tuck was on, and there was a killer on that show named the Carver who would carve up people's faces. And it was pumpkin time around Halloween. So all those 3 things together gave my dog his name. And he's about 11 now. Going back to what you said about youth ministry, you are not the first youth minister or minister in general that likes a trivia podcast. I've gotten, I think, 2 different messages from other religious folks that dig the show. Do you think that is a common theme in people of faith to listen to trivia? Play along?
I guess it might be. I wouldn't have thought of it before, but it seems like there's a trend now, at least.
There you go. Very good. And then, Jim, do you want to say how old you are?
I will be 40 next month.
Very good. And I guess before we get into your email, I'll read your email here in a second, but you reach out to me, you live in Nebraska, you like trivia, and you were thinking, maybe I'll start a trivia night, and you had some questions for me. So that's going to be basically what this episode of the show is talking about, how to start a trivia night in your hometown. Maybe you've thought about doing that before. Maybe you've listened to my show and you said, I could do this. And that's what this episode is going to be all about, hopefully to help some people kind of see if they're down for it. So I'll kick things off. I'm going to read this email you sent me. It was very nice. I really appreciate when people reach out. And this is from Jim Fields. He said, hey, Ryan, first of all, I absolutely love your podcast. First heard about it through the Fully Posable podcast and checked it out. And now I don't miss it. Even if I'm not into the topic of the week, I really enjoy playing along in my car and learning new things. I've always enjoyed trivia, and this podcast has really stoked up that interest in me. It's made me wonder about what it would be like to host trivia nights. I live near a college town in central Nebraska and think there could be a market for it at some of the bars and breweries in the area. Anyways, I was just wondering if you could share a bit about how you got started, what the process looked like. Just curious how you got it all going. So that was your email, Jim, and that kind of is going to set up this episode. So I guess I'll kind of go into how I got into hosting trivia. People do ask me this all the time, so I do have it on the tip of my tongue, ready for you. But I started doing stand-up. I mentioned Rockford and things like that. Started doing comedy in 2006 at Western Illinois University in another farmy kind of town, working-class town called Macomb, Illinois. You ever been to Macomb?
I have been to Macomb, actually.
Yeah, that's where I went to college. And my girlfriend at the time was, I was always talking about wanting to do stand-up comedy. And there was a open mic in the dorm basement. And she was like, you should do it. And I did it. And it went pretty well. So then you kind of get addicted to performing and writing jokes and trying to make them better and make your friends laugh and all that stuff. And then, so I started doing stand-up in 2006. From 2006 to about 2010, I did comedy and worked full-time and went to school and all that good stuff. And then I had this great full-time job at a community college called Moraine Valley Community College in Palos Hills, Illinois. Are you familiar with that college at all?
I'm not familiar with that
I think it's the second biggest community college in Illinois, if I'm not mistaken. But I worked there in the admissions office, and I worked with a bunch of older ladies who were like, this guy knows how to do PowerPoint. He's a genius, like that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, it was a great career. I could have stayed there forever and made tons of money and had benefits, but I would have been stuck in Illinois doing something I hated. So I did that for 3 years right out of college from 22 to 25. That same girl that told me about the open mic, I married, and we've been together for going on 13 years, I think. And we got married right around then. And our first year married, I said, I'm going to quit my job and do comedy full time. And she said, okay. Super supportive. My parents were super supportive just in case I needed something to fall back on. So I'm on the south side of Chicago, and I'm doing comedy shows on the weekends, usually at clubs, doing like a Thursday through Saturday type thing. So I had like Monday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday were usually open for me to go do open mics or hopefully paid shows or showcases and things around Chicago, or maybe drive up to Rockford for like a Wednesday night or something like that. But it got to be to the point where I was really open on Mondays and Tuesdays, and I'm like, how can I make some money without traveling too far earlier in the week? And there was a guy in Chicago named Tony Valley who had a company called Yes, I Am Show Business. And he still has it. I don't know if he still has that company, but he runs a comedy theater in Chicago called the Whip Theater. And but back in the day, about 2009, 2010, he had comedians hosting trivia at these different bars. It was called stand-up trivia. So all you would do is you'd show up, and there'd be someone running the slides and the audio and everything for you. So you just had to kind of grab a mic and make the questions interesting and funny, and kind of was like hosting a game show. And you're talking to a bar, and I really enjoyed it. And I had really been getting better and better at doing crowd work and talking to people on stage, and not just sticking to material around that time. So I really embraced hosting trivia. I thought it was just a ton of fun to do, and it paid. It was like, I think it was $75 for 2 hours of hosting trivia. And I was like, this is a pretty good thing at the beginning of the week. And so I would do that on like Mondays and Tuesdays in the city. And then I did that for maybe like 6 months. And then after a while, I was like, hey, Tony, do you mind if I lived in the suburbs. I lived in the south suburbs, town called Crestwood, Illinois. So I was like, do you mind if I set up some trivia nights closer to my house? And he goes, yeah, I'll give you everything you need to do it. So I did that. And I had maybe like 3 different trivia nights that I was running on like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then I would do comedy stuff on the weekend. And after about a year of that, we decided we were moving to LA. So I had to kind of farm those out. I had some guys run those for a little while, for like the first year I lived out here. But they kind of fizzled just being so far away. And I wasn't putting a bunch of full-time effort into it because I was in a new city and trying to do a million things at once. So when I moved out to LA, I didn't have a job or anything like that. And I was like, what can I do to make some money? I know I'll start a trivia night. And I kind of asked around to some bars, and everybody either had a trivia night or had no intention of wanting to do anything like that. So I kind of just found myself hoping that somebody would let me do it. Finally, a connection, this dude, Steve Hernandez, ran a cool comedy show in Covina, California at a place called the Chatterbox. And he said, hey, they want to try trivia on Monday nights. Can you do it for $100? And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. So on Monday nights from 10 to midnight for about 80 weeks was my first trivia night in LA. And that was kind of like when my company started. So this was 2012, right around 2013. And I had 1 trivia night. And right now I have 17 trivia nights. So it's really grown over the last 5 years or so, and it turned from a side hustle into like like almost like a full-time business. So that's kind of how I got started, and it was just like this big growth that happened, and I would just kind of put all my spare time into putting myself out there. If somebody needed trivia at a bar, they wanted to try a night for free and that kind of thing. So I'll get into more details on that and how to make all that work. But does that kind of answer your question about how I got started in hosting trivia?
Yeah, I think it does. Absolutely. And I know you mentioned on the show, I think this last week now, it's going to turn into kind of your full-time gig.
Yeah,
forward, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I do a lot of freelance television producing stuff. So I'm like usually a segment producer on different clip shows for the last 4 years. 3.5 years or so. And we just wrapped on season 3 of this Nickelodeon show called Crash Leads. And so with the growth of how many places I have right now and how many other comedians I'm hooking up with gigs and things, it's just and a little break for the holidays and a new baby being born. It kind of is just a cool thing to think about, like, oh, if I could start 2018 like making this side hustle like a real business, and this could be the thing that I do as a full-time career. So I'm super excited about that, and it's crazy. I mean, like, I'm to the point now where people are really hitting me up. There's a lot of really good word of mouth, and there's a lot of really good Google search results for trivia hosts in LA. I'm coming up, I don't know how, but I'm coming up very high without spending any money. So people keep hitting me up, and they'll be like, hey, I'll always ask. That's like a big thing. Is I think people sometimes forget to ask when they get success of any kind, like even one booking of any kind. Sometimes you like forget about like, how did they find me? Or you don't even think to ask. So I ask every time, like right away, like on the first email or call, I'm like, hey, how did you happen to come across me? And 9 times out of 10, they're like, hey, I just looked on Yelp, or I searched Trivia Host LA and you popped up. And I don't know if it's one of the things that I kind of try and set myself aside from other trivia companies is that there's a face to a name, like right when you go to the website. So it's like you see a dude's face, which is my face, and then you see all the info below it on what it is. And hopefully that first page looks like a lot of fun, or there's something on that page that makes you go like, oh, that's what I'm looking for. Sometimes you go to these other trivia sites, and I've done a lot of research on all the trivia companies pretty much in the US and like what their websites look like and what you see right away. And a lot of them are very corporate-y looking, and like they don't look like they provide the funnest time. And I'm all about providing the funnest time right away for your eyes. You know what I mean? Yeah,
no, absolutely. Yeah. It makes sense to me. And that's, the podcast and that is probably why I gravitated towards the show as well. So
awesome, man. Yeah, you had mentioned, are you a wrestling action figure collector? You mentioned fully posable at the beginning.
Yeah, I am. I wish there was a little more expendable income to pump into that.
Yeah, don't we all, right?
But,
yeah.
Right. But,
I have.
No, I am. And,
yeah. What's your do you have a specific thing that you collect? Specific type?
I usually stick with certain guys.
Yeah.
I was a huge Ricky Steamboat fan back in the late 80s, I suppose.
Sure.
So anything with him, I usually grab, and now it's actually a lot of the guys who have come through like Ring of Honor and that. Kevin
that's
Owens
great.
And
Finn
Balor and.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've actually never done that where I'm like, I got to buy every figure for one guy, but I do know a lot of people that do that, and that's pretty cool. I actually just got, Becky Lynch is one of the guests on this Nickelodeon show I work on, and my brother sent me a Becky Lynch Elite figure for my daughter to get signed. So hopefully,
awesome.
I think we'll definitely get to meet her. I don't know how much time she'll have to sign something, but maybe at least my daughter can take a picture. She got the light up goggles as well, so that should be really fun. This coming up this Thursday, so that should be really fun. But yeah, to get back on the subject at hand, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I've got all these places. I've got a lot of people hitting me up for holiday parties, and it's just a lot of friends of friends. Like branding wise, I think I've put myself out there in a way where, like, if somebody that knows me at all, if somebody hits them up and goes, hey, I'm thinking about starting a trivia night at my bar, my venue, they hopefully think of me first, which is cool. And it took like a number of years to get to that point. But I just did it as much as I could in my spare time, just, social media posting, starting this podcast, all that stuff. The podcast is super fun for me to do. Hopefully, like you said, fun for you to listen to. But ultimately, the podcast is just a voice calling card for my voice in your ears every week. So if you dig the podcast, maybe you would, book me for an event, or maybe you'd check on my website or recommend me to a friend, or all those different things. Even talking to you on this call right now, like there's not really much in it for me to help you set up a trivia night in Nebraska, but I get a huge kick out of someone, making money, or even just having fun doing something that they really enjoy, as like a little side hustle. I've helped my friend Josh Alton set up a trivia night in Des Moines, Iowa. I've helped people set up different trivia parties for different events without actually being there. And whatever I can do to help you, Jim, I am super on board. So I guess we can dive into some questions from you, and then I'll kind of like fine tune some answers and bullet points along the way. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
And actually, it's funny you mentioned, I had heard the episode you had with Josh.
Oh, nice.
And mentioned the Des Moines. And we, when we travel back to Illinois or Wisconsin to be with family, Des Moines is usually kind of our stopping ground.
Oh, that's great.
To not do it all in one day if we don't have to. And,
there you go.
So I was telling my wife, I was like, we got to check this out sometime. If we haven't hit the right night, we got to go check these out. So hopefully that'll work at some point.
Sure. And then I have some I have some bullet points and questions for you as well as we kind of go along. So I guess we'll kick it off with a question from you, and then we'll go from there.
All right. So I've checked your website out, and I see, you post the topics that your questions are going to be in, or your categories, I guess.
Yeah.
How do you come up with all those topics, categories? Is it just brainstorming? Is it, How do you decide that?
For sure. Yeah. And I've been doing that for, consistently every single week, at least 50 questions plus, over 5 rounds for probably at least 4 years. Because one of the things that you kind of have to do is, if you're at a really good venue where people are coming back week after week and you're doing a good job, and they like to play trivia, and then they hopefully like, your presentation of the trivia and you as a host and things like that, you got to give them the variety, and you got to give them the 5 different things every week. Sometimes it is tough to come up with 5 new things every week, but and I do repeats. Like I probably do a Seinfeld round like every 6 to 8 months. I slip in a Seinfeld, so it's usually different questions every time I do it. But sometimes, like, I might just have a certain question that I know is really good ingrained in my head, and there might, people might have played it 8 months ago, but they usually don't even remember. There's very rarely a time where someone's like, you did this question a year and a half ago. You know what I mean? Right. But it does, that is something to think about. So it's basically coming up with the hardest part is coming up with the topics to make them fun, varied, and different. So like the topics I have this week are black and white things, animated movies, Justice League characters, and world capitals. Now, that's kind of scratching a lot of different itches. So Justice League, I picked because that movie's coming out this Friday, and a lot of people, whether they love it or hate it, are going to see that movie. So that's kind of, it's fun to piggyback off of the things that are kind of blowing up in pop culture at the time. Especially Stranger Things, like doing a Stranger Things round when season 2 came out a few weeks ago. That was like, a must do, that kind of stuff. Right. I try to make my categories, I always describe it to people as the pink pie in Trivial Pursuit. So it's movies, music, television, comic books, video games. You're not going to get a ton of academic stuff with me unless it's requested, like for a party or something. Or if it's an older crowd, like I do trivia at a few senior communities, and you kind of have to do a lot of academic stuff, more like geography, history type stuff, instead of like, what video game is Luigi in? Like, they wouldn't even know that. You know what I mean? Once you get to be like 75, you just don't give a hell about any of that stuff. But it is, you kind of have to think about your audience. World capitals, for example. Here's a perfect example. I do trivia at a restaurant bar in Venice, right on Venice Beach, California. And right on the beach, it's also connected to a hostel, so an international hostel. So you got all these international people that are on holiday, as they call it, for like 2 or 3 weeks, maybe staying at the hostel, coming down to play trivia, have a beer, that kind of thing. So last week, we've only been there about a month, so I'm still kind of working out the kinks. But last week, we had a round about Monopoly, and Monopoly is different all over the world. So like Boardwalk is not Boardwalk in Italy. Like their version of Monopoly is the biggest thing in Italy or whatever. So I totally forgot about that. So like I needed to cater that round to be a little bit more international. So this week we have a round called World Capitals, which I think would be better for like the international abroad traveler to know. There's still stuff like we're still doing Justice League, which is kind of universal. Like I feel like those movies are so huge. No matter where you're from, you've probably heard of Wonder Woman or Superman and things like that. Right. But sometimes those minute categories, like something like Monopoly, is not going to work everywhere. Also, like you have to kind of know, like you can't do too many Nicktoon type questions, like Nickelodeon stuff, like something that you and I grew up on. We're a couple years apart. But, being an 80s, 90s kid kind of a thing, we know a lot of that stuff. But the kids that are just turning drinking age, like 21, they grew up on like SpongeBob. So they have no idea what like, Double Dare is, for example. Right. And they do from some of those channels and things like Noggin and Guts, or not Guts. There's different Nickelodeon like game show channels and things. Gas, I think, is one of them. The Game and Sports Nickelodeon Network. But yeah, they can find out those things, but they tend to not as nostalgic as I want to say kids, like people in their 20s are these days. Some of the youngest ones don't give a shit about anything that happened before, like Pokemon. So like I'll get this, I joke about it all the time, but I'll get a girl that was, it's usually a girl. No offense to female listeners, but it's usually like a 21-year-old girl will be like, like, what is this movie? And I'm like, it's Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. They're like, I've never heard of it. They're like, that came out before I was born. And I'm always like, a lot of stuff happened before you were born. You know what I mean? Right. So it's the world
did not begin on that day.
Yeah. So it's weird. It's like you have to have a good mix of young and old, but you also have to know the demographics of your location. Now, you mentioned wanting to maybe do trivia in a college town. So that would be kind of a good note for you to make sure you have a good mix of stuff that is probably outside of your wheelhouse, being going, in your late 30s. You might have to dive in and kind of see like more of like the Snapchat social media culture and what they're into and that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? But also I think ultimately, if you do a lot of stuff about the classics, like if you're talking about the Wizard of Oz and you're of any age and you don't know like basics about the Wizard of Oz, you're just stupid. And you can't really, cater to every single person. There's always going to be like a note from a bar that's like, oh yeah, they didn't really like the questions about Mario Brothers. And then like that same night, I'll get 2 other bars that are like, we love the Mario round. So you kind of have to kind of figure out what works for your bar and kind of cater your questions and rounds around that. Now, to kind of piggyback on that, one of the biggest things you want to figure out if you're going to get into trivia hosting is what your format's going to be. So what I did, I kind of hijacked the format from my friend Tony Valley in Chicago with his approval and said, like, can I do my own version of this? And he's like, for sure. Now, he would show all his questions on slides, which is something that I still do to this day. There's a few locations I have that kind of just work better doing the audio, but I still have the slides prepared and the hosts are reading them off the slides. But I do everything with PowerPoint or Keynote. and I go back and forth between the two of them as they develop bugs and things. Like it'll be like Keynote works great for a year, and then it just crashes for no reason on every device. And then it's like, all right, I'll switch to PowerPoint. So I go back and forth. Right now I'm in a PowerPoint cycle. It's not as nice looking, but it gets the job done. And a lot of times it doesn't really matter what the slides look like, but I do get a lot of compliments on just the slides being there. A lot of the other trivia nights, it's again, usually just a host and a microphone, and they're just reading the questions. So sometimes people are like, what the hell? If the audio is bad, you can't really hear them and stuff. But if you can see them, you're kind of catering to people who learn and, input information for a trivia team in different ways. So that's something I would recommend that you try and do if you have the technology and the means available. I use Apple products for mostly everything. So I hook up an Apple TV to the bar TV or projector that I'm going to use. And sometimes they already have that, which is great. And then I just mirror everything on my iPad to the screen. So like all the PowerPoints are made on a computer on my Microsoft OneDrive account, and they're all just on there, and I can just pull them up on the PowerPoint app and mirror my app as a slideshow presentation to the television screen. It fills up the whole screen, and then good to go. So that's kind of like what I do. I have a small speaker that I use. It's like a $100 speaker made by, I think the brand is Custom with a K, Custom. It's $100 on Amazon and Guitar Center, which is where I buy a lot of stuff. It's just like a $100 little amp. It has a power cord, and you can plug a XLR cable and microphone into it, and it's totally loud enough for anything that you're going to be doing, unless it's like a huge venue. You can get a wireless version of that, so it has like a 12-hour battery that you can charge. It's a little bit heavier, and it's $150, so it's $50 more for that function, and also it has Bluetooth, so you don't need any auxiliary cord to play music through it. So that's kind of my new setup is $150 speaker. It's like a $40 Shure brand. That's my favorite brand of microphone, Shure. Shure brand microphone, and I think it's $40. It comes with an XLR cable. It's $15. And that's literally all you need. You need those. Those are the essentials: the microphone, the cord, and the speaker, and the power cord for the speaker. And then in terms of setup for the slides, it's like an iPad. You can use your iPhone. If you have an iPhone Plus, that's really good. You can do it on an Android. You just have to figure out what slide program works best, and then you'd have to figure out how to project them to the TV, because the only reason I use Apple stuff is because of the AirPlay feature. To be able to mirror to the TV. I know there's a lot of smart TVs out now that you can mirror to, but you kind of have to, you don't really have control over what the bar has, So if you want to have kind of your easiest setup, you can get an Apple TV. I've been buying them because they have like newer versions of Apple TV. I think it's Apple TV 4th generation. I think it's $199 or $150, and it's kind of a bigger box, and it's like a DVR and all these different things. But the old school, not first generation, but second or third generation Apple TVs are like a steal on Craigslist, because people are just wanting to get rid of them because you don't really need it anymore. If you're getting the brand new Apple TV, or if you just have Google Chromecast or an Xbox or a PlayStation, everything has all the apps on it now. Especially, actually, all the TVs are smart TVs now too. So those are less and less common, but you can get them on Craigslist. Like someone just gave me one for $20. Someone gave me one for free. I think another one for $30. So try not to pay more than $40, I'd say, for an Apple TV if you're looking to get one of those. And that just hooks up with a HDMI cord and a power cord, and it comes with a little silver remote that you will lose all the time. But that's my recommendation for setup, especially if you're just maybe looking to do one trivia night at first and kind of see how it goes. You're not going to spend all that stuff together. You're spending maybe $250, $300, but you can make that back in a couple weeks if you get a decent place. So that's what I'd recommend in terms of setup. Let's go with another question from you. What do you got?
Yeah. Well, let's bounce off what you were just kind of saying there.
Sure.
I'll come back to questions about questions.
Yeah.
But I think I've seen a flyer on your Facebook that it's free to play for the people at the bar.
Sure.
To come and hang out at. So do you set up something then with the bar that they pay you direct?
Exactly.
For coming and doing it,
yeah. So the way that I make money hosting trivia is I go either a lot of people are coming to me, like I said, at this point, but I still do like scouting. So if I find out about a cool bar or a bar that doesn't have a trivia night that I think could work, or it's close to home, or I know somebody that lives by it, I might go in and kind of give them a pitch. So once you kind of have your equipment, once you have your game, your format, I'll tell you real quick before we go into the the bar paying you. I'll tell you about format. So I kind of skimmed over that before, but what I do is 5 rounds of trivia. Every round has 11 questions. The first 10 questions are just regular questions. They're 1 point each if you get them right. And then the bonus question at the end of each round is worth 2 points. And usually it has 2 answers. So it'll be like, who are the stars of the movie Night and Day? And it's Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz, I think was the name of that dumb movie. But that might be like a 2-point question if the whole round was about the word night or something like that. That might be the bonus question at the end of that round. So you can get a possible 12 points on every round that you do with me. The first 4 rounds are all the themed things, like I said, Justice League or World Capitals and things. And you can pick one of those 4 rounds to double up. So it's not double or nothing. It's just whatever you get right is doubled. So if you got 10 questions right on round 1, which was about world capitals, and you doubled it up, instead of 10 points, you would get 20 points. You can only do that once throughout the night, and you want your team to use the double on the round you think you'll do the best on. So that's the first 4 rounds. The 5th round is called the confidence round, and this is 10 questions. There's no bonus. It's just 10 little bit tougher questions, no set category, kind of all over the place. And you're going to write down all your answers for that, and then you're going to rank them 10 to 1 based on how confident you are in the question, your answer being right to the question. So you have to use each number 1 time, and you would start with 10. You write down all your answers for the round and then go back. Okay, let's see. Which one do I think is the most right? Let's give this one a 10 because I know that's right. And then this one a 9. I think that's pretty right. And then this one an 8, and then go all the way down to 1. So the last round is out of 55 points. So that's kind of the format that I use. It's 4 regular rounds, 1 confidence round, and then whoever has the highest score at the end of that wins first place at the bar. I'll get to prizes and stuff a little bit later. But yeah, you kind of want to figure out what format you want to do. Do you want to display all your questions on slides? Do you want to have picture hints on slides? Do you want to do rounds that are just image-based? I try and stay away from all image-based rounds because, like I said, some bars do have audio, some don't. So when I'm trying to make everything kind of universal for the week, it's just easier to have everything without pictures so that people can just read them and people can just see them, and it's not like I'm losing, out around because we're doing a picture round at a place where you can't see the pictures. Now, if you wanted to do both, you could definitely do that. And like at the rounds, when instead of showing pictures on a TV, you can just hand out like a worksheet with pictures on it, and they're writing the answers on that worksheet. So if that's something you want to kind of prepare and create, there's a lot of trivia companies that do that, little handout sheets where they'll have pictures from Christmas movies, and then you have to write down the Christmas movie underneath it or something like that. So you kind of want to figure out your format. You want it to be fun and varied and competitive, but not too complicated to explain. Sometimes people get a little lost with the confidence round, but once you've done it once, it sticks in your head how to do it. And I guess it's a lot like different football gambling pools. I don't really know anything about it, but people have told me that before. So that's kind of a little bit about the format. You kind of want to figure out what you want to do. Ideally, you want your format to last as long as the bar wants you to do trivia. So anything longer than 2 hours, I'd probably try to avoid. That you don't really want to do trivia for more than 2 hours. That's kind of the limit in terms of keeping people there and interested in things like that. 90 minutes is great if you can find a bar that wants to do 90 minutes, but I'd say most of the places I do are 2 hours. And basically, they're paying you to get either new clientele in their bar because they've seen other trivia nights that have been successful, or maybe their patrons are like, hey, when are you getting a trivia night? And they've gotten a lot of people hitting them up like, hey, we want to do that. We hang out here and we would love to do something like that. So that's kind of the 2 biggest reasons. They want to get new people in with the idea of a trivia night, much like you would a karaoke night or a paint night or a DJ night or like 80s night or whatever it is, whatever your gimmick is. That's one way. And then the other way is like, there's like a demand for it. One of the coolest thing is when there is a demand for it. So when I go, like I'm starting a brewery tonight. It's called King's Brewing Company in Rancho Cucamonga, California. And King's, I literally just hit up because someone said, hey, you would do good at this place. And I said, okay. So I hit him up, and the owner was like, yeah, people have been asking us a lot when we're going to start one. I think they've only been open maybe a year or 2. And the guy goes, yeah, people have been asking about that a lot. What are your rates? When can you start? And I was like, oh, sweet. So I didn't really have to do any kind of pitch. They were just on board. And I stopped in to drop off some flyers and things. And a bunch of people were like, oh, is this the trivia guy? Like there was a lot of buzz about it. So I have expectations that tonight's going to go really well, and word of mouth will travel, and people will go, oh, we got to go there on Mondays to play trivia with this guy at this place. So that's what I'm banking on there. that's kind of the main reason a place they want to entertain their current patrons, or they want to bring in new patrons, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and then to kind of go back to what you said about, are they paying you? So yeah, you want to come up with like, whatever your rate is to do that. Now, there's no exact number. I know people that host trivia for, several $100s for one place for one night. I know people that do it for free drinks. So you got to kind of like figure out what is it worth to you? What are you trying to get out of it? When I first started doing it, like I said, that one guy, he goes, "Hey, can you do it for $100?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to, but I don't charge $100 anymore." I kind of have risen up through the ranks of what I think I'm worth and what I think I provide, especially in addition to other trivia companies. When I see what other trivia companies are paid or hear what they're paid and what they provide, I always want to provide more for less, if that makes sense, because I want to be the guy that everybody goes with. So I don't have an exact number for you, but that's kind of like what you want to kind of figure out. If it's worth $150 for you to go set everything up and do the promo, like a promo is a big part of it. I always include that in my rate, like flyers, providing flyers, flyer design, Facebook invites, email blasts, all that stuff. Talking to people I know that live in that neighborhood and say, "Come check this out. You're going to love it." Things like that. You got to kind of figure out how much time you want to put into it. Hosting trivia is really only, a 90-minute or 2-hour job. But there's a lot of back end stuff. There's probably 10 to 20 hours of other work that goes on throughout the week with just writing the questions or researching stuff or driving to drop off materials at a place, and things like that. So that's kind of what I'm into now with the influx of locations that I have. But it's a really fun thing. It's the only thing I've ever done. Comedy is really close, but it's the only thing that I've done that actually pays pretty great once you get it going, that never feels like work. It really feels like I'm just going up and talking to people for 2 hours, kind of hosting a game show, kind of getting to know everybody. Everybody at my trivia nights knows that I'm having a baby, like in a week. You know what I mean? And that's right. Like when I do stand-up, I might do jokes about that, but then I never see those people again. When I do trivia, I see them week after week like they're tuning into a sitcom about my life, if that makes sense. And that's what I get out of it. So it's like, yeah, it's cool. You can make some money doing it, but the biggest thrill for me is connecting with people on a microphone for 2 hours every night in a way that you can't really do as a stand-up. You can sit on a stage and just tell people your stories and connect with them, but a lot of times it's really tough to get that stage time, and once you have it, it's just hard to kind of maintain that and keep it a career with staying close to home. You kind of have to get on the road, and you have to, get booked around the country and around the world and get known. And there's just a lot more legwork and a lot of things that need to happen. So this was kind of my result of like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be the famous comedian that some people aspire to be, but I tried my hardest doing stand-up, and stand-up led to this. And there's going to be some kind of full circle where I come back to stand-up because of hopefully some notoriety as being this great trivia host. That's kind of like where I'm at. But, that's 12 years into doing comedy and about 4 years into doing trivia. Yeah,
that's a great way to look at it. And,
yeah.
Obviously, if I start a trivia night, I want to, part of it is to do a side hustle and, earn a little something. But
yeah.
And I realized that, there's no way to put a number on it. The market in LA and the market in central Nebraska are kind of, couldn't be on more different planes, I'm sure.
That's true. Yeah. But you also, someone told me this actually, one of my first comedy road gigs ever. They said, always remember there's value to what you do. And, that goes for anything. But even as a performer, as somebody that's plugging in a microphone and talking to people or trying to get people to stay somewhere for a couple hours to have a few extra beers, there is value to that. So, never do it for free, but, kind of find what works for you. Now, when I say don't do it for free, I do shit for free all the time. I will, I do a lot of charity events. I do a lot of fundraisers. Sometimes they pay. Sometimes people will be like, no, we have to pay you. And I'm like, okay. But I do a lot of volunteer stuff. I do a lot of this kind of stuff, a lot of calls with people that are trying to set something up or, there's definitely a lot of my time is donated. But I also offer sometimes If somebody's kind of on the fence about starting one, or they're like, I don't know if it would really work here, I'll be like, hey, let me do the first one for you. I'll come in and I'll do like an hour version of what I do for your staff. And they'll go, oh, okay. And I'll do that. And they go, oh, this would be great. If there were people in here, this would really take off. So sometimes doing stuff for free, don't ever turn that down, because you can always turn something for free into something lucrative if it's the right setting and the right time and all that kind of stuff.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Here's a question I had for you. So, like, are you, you've done some youth ministry stuff. Are you somebody that's on a microphone in a church setting? Like, are you pretty comfortable on a mic?
Yeah, I am. My first major, actually, before I switched to religion and youth ministry, was radio, TV, broadcasting, and I'm not at all intimidated by speaking in front of public. I preached a couple of times while I did ministry, and
there you go.
Actually did a podcast myself for I don't know. We probably did about a year.
There you go.
With a buddy of mine. So yeah, no, that's comfortable, and I love talking to people. It's a huge part of my job now too, is getting people to know what we do.
Yeah.
So that's fun too, and I think it would mesh well.
There you go. That's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely something you have to be. I mean, you could be uncomfortable on a microphone, and then you want to use this to maybe get more comfortable. But if you have some kind of base as a performer or speaker in any way, you'll definitely flourish as a host. If you like game shows, if you like, and that's also another thing. There's people that are great trivia hosts that don't do anything close to what I do. They might just show up. They might be pretty cordial, and they might have a great, clear voice, and they read the questions, and then they score up the sheets, and then they leave and go home. I try and do a lot of giving people nicknames. I kind of inject a lot of what I enjoyed most out of stand-up, which was crowd work and kind of getting to know people on stage, into the trivia night. So, somebody that comes once, if they like that kind of personality and hopefully the rapid fire nature that I'm able to deliver it at, that hopefully they're going to come back, or they're going to tell their friends. People love having their balls busted, if you know that phrase. Like, it's so weird when, that was kind of my way to diffuse any kind of bully situation when I was younger. If anybody was, intimidating me, I would just try and make them laugh, and it usually solved the problem. So it's, I've used that to a degree to literally, there was a time, this was a stand-up story, but I got booked to do like a casino holiday party, and I went up first, and there was like a Latino headliner, and they had hired him, and I was kind of just the opening guy. And I went up, and the owner of the whole company was this real yuppie, kind of jerky, bleach blonde hair guy, like head of a company, like the typical guy you would think of, some big company up Northern California. And he's he's like, hey, don't do any dumb jokes. When you get up there, just bust my balls. Everybody will love it. And I went up there, and I gave him exactly what he wanted, and I just made fun of this dude. And it was like uproarious laughter for a half hour. And I was done, and that guy paid me. He gave me a huge tip. He's like, that was the funniest shit ever. And then the headliner, who had gotten paid more to do the gig, he went up, and he didn't get the memo about, we just want to make fun of our boss. And I had already done that. So he just went into his material, and they literally cut him off after 10 minutes and just carried on with the party. So he still got paid and stuff. But it's like the power of being able to bust somebody's balls, I found, is like invaluable, especially out here, where you can have some people that are like, looking for that. And even people, like just a couple zingers here and there. Sometimes people are like so impressed. They're like, how did they come up with that on the spot? Not knowing that I've said the exact same joke in a different setting the night before, but it sounds like it's brand new. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there is stuff that happens on the fly that, I'm super happy to joke about, but sometimes the quickest little quip, just worded the right way towards somebody who just walked in or something, that could turn into 2-3 trivia parties down the road. Like, I called these two guys Ben and Jerry, who they just looked like two hippie looking guys. And I'm like, these guys hopped right off of the ice cream pint, or whatever. And I kept calling them Ben and Jerry all night. And this lady emailed me like a week later. She was like, hey, I'm Sheila. I'm Ben and Jerry. I don't know if you remember Ben and Jerry. I'm Ben's wife. Like, ha, ha, ha. Can you do our holiday party? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that. So it's like those little impressions you can leave on people leads to other business, other opportunities, friendships. Some of my best friends in LA are people that were trivia players that just go like, oh, this is a guy who I'd hang out with. And when I didn't have any friends when I moved here, I made a lot of friends really quickly just by, kind of being myself, being genuine and joking around with people. So that's how I've really made it work for me. And if you have, any version of that, if people like you as a minister, if people like the things you're able to put out there into a microphone, then kind of try and incorporate what you've gotten in terms of feedback, and compliments and even in criticisms, and try and kind of build that into a package of what you think a great trivia night would be hosted by somebody like you, and just make that flourish, you know?
Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks, Ryan.
Oh, for sure. That. Yeah.
So I'm going to bounce back to questions for a minute here.
Okay, cool.
You talked about writing the questions and that sort of thing. How do you organize the questions? So you've been doing 1,000 trivia nights now. So and you said you cycle through questions, and that makes sense. And I agree with you. You don't usually probably expect anyone to say, "Oh, I remember that from a year and a half ago." But how do you kind of organize that all so that you keep it so you don't choose those questions a month later and realize, oh crap, now I'm doing it again?
I think having the deadline, like seriously, I actually have to, as soon as I'm done with this, I have to do 5 rounds of trivia before in like 2 hours. So it's like I have all the ideas in my head, and like when I have the topics in there, the questions just kind of start floating around. And I think having to do new ones every week makes sure that I'm not repeating, topics or questions too frequently. So when I'm constantly have to try to think of a good mix of academic and pop culture stuff to kind of mush into 1 week of trivia, I just have everything in folders. So I can kind of go through like on Microsoft OneDrive or Keynote on the iCloud, and I could just search the word Seinfeld and be like, did I do Seinfeld? Like, when was the last time I did Seinfeld? And I can go, okay, I did it 6 months ago, and I did quotes from Seinfeld. So now if I'm going to do Seinfeld, I could do, instead of quotes from the show, I could do side characters from Seinfeld and have questions about that. So different things like that kind of helps me organize. Also, like I do a lot of like Facebook posts where I'm like, hey, here's 2 rounds I'm doing. What are 2 more I should do? And people all the time will comment on that and be like, what about like this? What about that? How about this thing? Like the Justice League thing. I remember the movie was coming out this week, but until someone commented on my post, like, you should definitely do a Justice League round, I was like, oh yeah, duh, I should definitely do that. And there, I haven't really done a Justice League round before, but I've done a ton of Superman, Batman, DC Universe stuff. So I just kind of think about, I'm like, well, I haven't done any of that for probably about a year. So, like I should be good on any question that pops in my head or, and whatnot. But when I'm doing the questions, when I'm doing the rounds, I'm usually trying to think of 3 easy, 3 medium, and a few hard. So it's like, you want you don't want everything to be super hard. You got to kind of think of the different age ranges and the backgrounds of people, like we talked about earlier. But you want to have a couple questions where people are like, okay, I definitely know that, because you don't want people. The biggest thing as a trivia host is you don't want people to feel dumb. So it's like people are going to feel dumb at certain points, but you want them more likely to go like, aha, I got that. Like when you reveal the answers and the bar is going, yes, like all at the same time, you're doing a good job because they're all on board. Like they're like, yeah, I figured that out, and that was a tough question and things like that. So that's kind of like the way I build it and how I kind of come up with the difficulty and the variety of questions. And the organization is really just folders. It's literally just folders and the ability to search different topics and things like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So then how do the folks who come, do they sign up to play? Do they just kind of jump in? And then what happens, like you mentioned, Ben and Jerry kind of walk into the bar, a round in or whatever. Oh, yeah. Basically when I get to a trivia night, I go like, hey, we're about to do this thing in about 15 minutes, and all you need to play is answer sheets and a pen. So I kind of go, hey, you can come grab them up here, or I'm going to come around and just raise your hand or say, hey, buds. A big thing that I try and do is get people to say my name as much as possible, like the Destiny's Child song, Say My Name, because right. It's just, I have one of those names that like people like to say. And when I hear strangers saying it, hey buds, hey, can you give me this? It's like, that's that connection. It's like, that's the branding. That's the advertising. That's, the name Trivia with Buds. It's like, it's my name, but it's also, I hope that word kind of, when I'm talking to a bar, it's enveloping like, oh, it's like this dude's name is Buds. We live in a legal pot state. People are drinking Budweiser products. People are here with their friends. It's like all these different kind of connotations of that word mixed into one fun thing. So I'm lucky with a name like that. People always ask me if it's my real name, and I'm like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, it's not a stage name, but it is kind of peculiar. But
I pass out the answer sheets. Everyone's writing their team name at the top, and they have 5 answer sheets for the 5 rounds. They write down their answers, as I'm going over the round. And at the end of the round, they turn it in. I score them up. I might play some music in between, on the Bluetooth on the speaker or with an auxiliary cord, or the bar might be playing their own music, or like the Dodgers game was on a couple weeks ago. We would put that on in between, or all different kinds of setups and things. But yeah, you're just you're usually spending, like, if you're doing 2 hours of trivia, like the first round and scoring and putting all the names on the scoreboard is like a half hour. The next round's about a half hour, and then your last 3 rounds are usually about 20 minutes apiece. So that's kind of how it breaks down for me if you're doing 2 hours of trivia. And the first round definitely takes the longest because you have to do a lot of bookkeeping type stuff. The other program I use with PowerPoint and Keynote is called Numbers or Excel, either one of those. That's like the Mac version of Excel. And I just have a very simple formula set up with a total column for the scores that I'm putting in for each round for each team. So I have all the team names, then I have a total column, then I have rounds 1 through 5. And then, the formula will add up all the rounds and have their total. So they're seeing their total after every round. Sometimes I sort the team names, so it's like, all right, here's who's in first, and you could see that your name's at the very top of the list. And also, I give away bonus points for stuff. So there's a bonus column at the very end of the rounds columns, and it might say, like, you might get a bonus point if you follow me on Instagram, or if you take a picture of your team having a good time and tag me in it, or if you follow me on Twitter, or if you subscribe to my podcast. So I kind of switch up what the bonus points are for, and I try and not make it like, every team's getting 50 bonus points, but it's like, here and there people might do that, and that just kind of helps retain people for, a variety of different purposes and things. But that's kind of how the handing out of the answer sheets and the scoring and everything goes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned prizes, and I know you've talked about that on the podcast a few times before too, with the pop culture squares and the movie posters, and that sort of thing. How do you just kind of see what you come up with? And
yeah, that's actually one of the funnest things for me as a toy collector and like garage sale bargain hunter kind of a dude. Like, I love finding stuff that I think people would enjoy as prizes. So like, anything I can get my hands on that is a thing people have heard of, that's what I want to give away as a prize. Right now, I have a cool thing going on with a comedy club out here called Flappers. They gave me like 1,000 complimentary tickets to comedy shows, and on the back of them is like my company branded. So like when someone uses that comedy club ticket, they know that it came from me at a trivia night. So a lot of my venues are by 2 of their comedy clubs, and that's just a really cool thing. So, it might have cost them $40 to get those tickets printed for me, but I'm getting hopefully a ton of business into their club to get in for free, but then buy drinks and come back and all that stuff. So sometimes you could find really cool, partners to kind of trade services and goods with. Sometimes you can offer, like I'll do like for a 1-year event at a trivia location, I might be like, all right, the winner this week gets a free trivia party from me. I'll come to your house. You pick the rounds. We'll do a 2-hour trivia party on a Saturday night at your house. That's something I do quite a bit. The prizes, you always want the first place prize. I always think it's best to have that be something associated with the venue so that the players come back to the venue who's hosting the trivia for some reason. So maybe they're, it's a $50 gift certificate to eat and drink there, or maybe it's, tickets to their big concert that they're having at that venue as well in a few weeks, or, a free round of drinks, or whatever you want to do. That's kind of the best thing for first place. So the first place thing should be the biggest thing that they're getting because the teams, are competing for that. And then second and third are usually those fun things like comedy club tickets or a Seinfeld pop vinyl or, something like that. To kind of piggyback off of something earlier as well, you had asked, like, is it free, I think, for people to play? Like, all my nights are free. That's kind of how they're set up. But there are bars that do charge. But you do get into kind of a gray area where, like, you can't, it could be assessed as gambling in certain areas to be like, sure, hey, it's, like a $500 cash prize. I really don't know how some of these bigger trivia companies, they'll do like a $10,000 cash prize like once a year at certain places. And I'm like, isn't that technically gambling? I'm sure there's some way around it, but I try and stay away from anything that's like of real hardcore value like that. Like, I did it one time, then you got to really worry about people cheating, using their phones. It becomes like this huge thing. And I want everything to be super smooth, easy, and fun. So I'm more about the prizes, but I do know, there are trivia companies that do, it's $15. Like, I actually saw one the other day at a comic book store. It was like $15 per person and you could have up to 3 people on your team. So that would cost you essentially $45. And it was all Batman trivia, and it was only 3 rounds, but it was 3 hours. So it was like all these bizarre circumstances where I was like, what is that going to be like? And it was like cash prize $1,000. And I'm like, what? And it was like only 25 seats available total. And I'm like, wait, what? Like none of it added up to me. But to each their own, whatever you want to try and promote or do. But yeah, that's a little bit on that.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. I agree with you.
Yeah.
You get into cash prizes, the IRS starts asking questions, and
yeah. I mean, I try and be as clear, with all my income and everything as possible. So like to get into the to pay to play kind of thing is just not where I'm, not where I'm headed for any reason.
Right, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really all the questions I had jotted down, Ryan.
Awesome, man. Did you get some context on maybe doing it yourself, or like did I answer some stuff that might lead you to do it?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think getting that information kind of on your equipment and how you do that. I love the idea of the visual, having the questions. It kind of makes me think, although obviously it's more personal, but of and it's at Applebee's or Chili's or whoever has the like trivia game.
Exactly. Yeah.
That you can pay the $3 or whatever and play.
Yeah. Definitely.
Because it is that visual, and like you said, sometimes it's hard to hear. Or you get. It stops somebody from screaming out, well, I don't know, maybe it doesn't stop them, but, what was that again?
Yeah, exactly.
Having that back and forth. So I love that visual idea.
Mm-hmm. And you kind of want to, one other little thing, you kind of want to set the ground rules for the night. So you kind of like, when you start trivia, you obviously want to be like, all right, no yelling out answers, no using cell phones, There are some things where I do have people use cell phones. So sometimes I do a thing where I'm like, all right, everybody text me the funniest picture with this theme, and I'll give everybody a theme, and they'll send all the pictures to my phone, and then I AirPlay my phone to the screen if they're not grotesque. And we might do like a bonus round like that. Or I do this thing, there's an app called, not an app, but it's a website called Kahoot, which a lot of people use for educational purposes, but you can make multiple choice quizzes, and then people can, sign in on their phone on a website with a game pin to play. So kind of like the You Don't Know Jack, modern Jack in the Box games, if you've played any of those. It's like, it's that kind of setup. It's totally free. It's called Kahoot, Kahoot. So that's kind of a fun little bonus round where people can use their phones as buzzers to kind of play along and to keep score for you. So I do that as a bonus, but like you could essentially do a whole trivia company just using Kahoot if you had a good internet connection at the venue that you're looking to do. And then you would need almost nothing. You would still need the microphone and stuff to read the questions, and you need the Apple TV, but you wouldn't need any scorecards and things. But I think it would get kind of boring after an hour, or maybe even a half hour. It's a really good bonus game, but if you did all 54 questions like that, it would, I think, get kind of old. And you're trying to, but it might work for certain bars. Maybe a bar only wants to do trivia for an hour, and that kind of works better, and people like that. And you could still provide it. So the coolest thing is that a lot of these services, a lot of these things are free. You know what I mean? Like PowerPoint is free. There's a limit on the storage, but just make a new account. It's like 5 gigs. And then like once that's filled, start a new account, triviawithbuds1@gmail.com. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's a lot, I'm all about life hacks and work hacks and like all those little things. It's like sometimes you think you need more than you do. To start a podcast, you could do a podcast on your stupid cell phone with the Voice Memos app. And just, they're so good now. It's you put that down between 2 people and post it. And it's like, some people are like, I got to get $1,000 microphone. I got to get this. I got to get a soundboard. I don't have any of that stuff. I just have like the basics for everything that I need to do. I try and find the easiest way to do it and the highest quality way to do it. And then budget for that. But yeah, man, I'm glad to have done this call with you, and I'd love to hear your progress. Maybe we'll have you on for like a little update, like Unsolved Mysteries, when they'd be like, update, the body was found,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Hopefully it turns out better than some of those.
Yeah, hopefully there's no Robert Stack voiceover on this at any point. But yeah, that would be great. Keep me up to date on how it goes, and if there's anything I can do, if you're like, hey, I really need a question about the Stranger Things, like I have 10,000 questions, over 1,000 rounds, all piled up on different cloud services. So just feel free to let me know, and I'll do what I can to help.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate this, Ryan. Hopefully, we'll start something here in Nebraska that'll be really cool.
Very good, man. Then I'll take that propeller plane flight down there to check it out. That'll be great.
Absolutely.
All right. Can people find you online anywhere, Jim? Do you want people to follow you or check you out in any way?
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm Jimthy, Jimthy. Was branded with that as a teenager and just kind of stuck with it. So
Jimthy, very good.
That's the easiest place to find me.
What do you think your trivia company will be called if you start one?
I don't know. I really haven't. I've been trying to think of that. You're right. You've got a name that works so well with it. But I don't know that Jim Fields works. Trivia with Fields doesn't quite have the ring. So yeah,
trivia with marijuana Fields. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
Awesome, Jim. Glad to know you, and good luck, man.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Ryan.
All right, that is our special how-to episode of the Trivia with Buds podcast. Again, if you have questions about anything I covered or didn't cover, send me an email, ryanbudds@gmail.com. Happy to help you. Also use the contact form on my site, triviawithbuds.com, and click on contact. If you like the show, rate, review, and subscribe. Tell a friend about it, and look for new episodes every single Tuesday wherever podcasts are found. We'll be back next week with a regular one-on-one friend battle with two topics that two friends of mine are into. I think you will enjoy it. And as always, have a great week. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.